Amy, what about you?
Our producer accidentally stopped the recording and didn't realize it. Classic move. But don't worry, she owned it, and honestly, that's just proof her sobriety is still working. Self-awareness for the win. Now, let's get back to the show because unlike her recording skills, her sobriety is still going strong.
I made a boo-boo. I meant to put mute and I put stop record. So can you just go, Amy, what about you?
Okay, sorry.
That was my bad. I've never done that before.
Bill. This is why we edit,
This is a first. Look at me go.
No, first of all, don't edit it. We wouldn't edit that. We would come back and be like, do you know what we just did? We just paused the damn recording. we just restarted the recording. This would be in our episode.
Thanks for stopping the recording by accident, Tamar. That was awesome. We'll
No
have
problem.
Talk about your performance later, a performance review later. Welcome to the Sober Curator Podcast, where sobriety isn't just a lifestyle choice, it's the ultimate life hack. I'm Alysse Bryson, your fearless guide to a world where hangovers are canceled, fun is mandatory, and we still know how to shut down a dance floor, just with better shoes.
And I'm Tamar Routly, a.k.a. T-Bouge, your co-pilot, chaos coordinator, and the one who keeps Alysse from turning this podcast into a full-blown reality show. Buckle up, sober party people.
From lifestyle and travel to pop culture and zero-proof cocktails, we're serving up the stories, trends, and guests that prove sobriety isn't just about what you're missing. It's about finally remembering where you left your keys. Let's get the party started. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Sober Curator. And today, I am joined with some of my favorites because we are talking about Recovery Podcastland. If you have not been to this section of the site, it is really a great section to check out, especially since we gave it a remodel a few months ago. You can go to the page and you can go for a scroll and scroll past a bunch of different podcast album covers, and you can see our crew, which I will do some introductions here briefly. But they are labeled as VIPs, very important podcasts. And then people that are outside of our network, but we still love, you will see that they have a Sobe score on a scale of 1 to 5 Sobies. So with that said, hopefully you'll go check out the section. But let's jump into today's episode. We're going to talk about everything podcasting, and we're going to start with introductions. And of course, we're going to start with Tamar Medford, the podcast producer, T-Bouge. And we are, for those of you that are watching the video, we are both wearing matching hoodies today. This episode is brought to you by One Day at a Time Apparel. Shout out to Jeremy. We love him. We support him. Anyway, Tamar, what do you want to say?
Thanks, Alysse. My name is Tamar Medford, a.k.a. T-Bouge, Alysse's sidekick on the Sober Curator. And this has been a good time. And yes, I'm also a podcast producer and I get to edit these. So I feel like I get, kind of a double whammy, but I am also a podcast host of the You're Sober Now What podcast that I co-host with Lane Kennedy. And I just love all things podcast, talking about podcasts. So I'm excited about today.
You're excited. You're ready.
I'm excited. I'm pumped.
Okay. All right.
Bring it.
Speaking of excited, Amy Liz Harrison, you look like you're thrilled to be here this morning.
So I'm Amy Liz Harrison. I'm an author. I'm a podcast host of Eternally Amy, and I'm a certified life coach and 12-step coach. Most excitedly in my life, I'm excited to be a Sober Curator contributor.
And here I thought you were going to say being a mom, but instead you chose Sober Curator contributor. Hell yeah.
What more can you want, right? I mean,
Well, and I'm going to go off script here. Not that we use a script, we don't. But we recently got a report from Beehive, which is the system that we use to send out the Sober Sip email newsletter. And it was a real serendipitous moment because apparently the size of our email newsletter list, which is a little over 16,000, is the same size of the population of Crested Butte, which Amy and I went to in July of 2024 and rebranded it to Crested Cute. And so I was very excited to get that email. I don't think it was a coincidence, Amy.
Of course not.
Definitely not. Definitely not. All right, Bill, you're hanging with all the ladies today. I know you love to be surrounded by ladies. Let's hear from you.
Right. My name is Bill. I was going to throw in a line from our podcast, but if you want to listen to it, listen to the intro of our podcast. It's Sober, Not Mature. We talk and joke about that all the time. But yes, we are happy to be involved in this. We've been involved with the Sober Curator as contributors for about a year and a half now, I believe, or coming up. Yeah, about a year and a half. That's a long story, but there's an article about it on how we came into it. I shamed Alysse into adding us to a list and adding us as a Sober Curator. Basically called her out on Instagram, which was fun. I enjoyed every second of it. But yes, I mean, I'm happy to be a part of this. Mike and I, my co-host, started Sober Not Mature almost 3 years ago. End of February would be of 22 on a whim, basically with the mindset that, hey, we can talk a bunch of garbage into a microphone, and if somebody listens, that's wonderful. And we have a lot of fun doing it. And obviously, I'm very happy to be a part of the Sober Curator and the podcast and everything along with it. And everyone's got a podcast, so why not us? So.
Yeah. And you guys, you really have a great name, Sober Not Mature. Like that. I mean, it really just describes you to a T, Bill.
Right. And that was accidental. I posted something on Instagram. We had a whole nother name in place for what we were thinking about doing. And Mike had an idea too. And there was a gentleman that whenever I posted it, he said, well, he goes, that's an interesting t-shirt. I think it was a Moist t-shirt or something I was wearing.
Oh,
and
Moist.
He said, well, that's a great t-shirt. I said, well, I'm sober, not mature. And then, he goes, that's great. He goes, that would make a great t-shirt. I deleted a comment. I deleted a post. I'm like, nobody's taken that. And when we searched, I was astounded that nobody's ever, that name's not anywhere. I mean, there's been one copycat on Instagram after that fact, but I'm like, I don't care. Somebody searches for us, they'll find us, not them anyhow. So yeah. It was a whim, just like the podcast, but that's how it should be.
I love that. The Sober Curator was not the original name either. The original name was the Sober Critic. And about 2 weeks in, after I accidentally launched the website because I didn't know what I was doing, I changed the name because I was afraid that people were going to think I was criticizing their recovery or their sobriety. And that wasn't ever my intention. And the word curator hit and it stuck and it was a much better fit. So yeah, I'm all for names just kind of coming up on their own. Speaking of coming up, Megan Swan has a book that's just recently launched and she has a podcast too. What do you know?
Yeah. So it's an honor to be celebrating. I was going to say my 2-year wedding anniversary. It's my 2-year Sober Curator anniversary. And a part of the production, the podcast is called Wellness is a Way of Life. I have to think back. I feel like it's the 3rd year I've been doing it, but don't quote me on that. And yeah, just releasing my book, Marinating in Chaos. And yeah, all things well-being is my jam.
Love that. And fun fact for the listeners at home, Tamar actually edits both Megan and Amy's podcasts, which is something new that we took on in the fall of 2024. So we just love all things podcast all the time. Is that because we like to hear ourselves talk? Probably. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, let's get started. Bill is like, yes, absolutely. Let's get started. I'm curious for each of you, since I am the baby in the group. In this case, I am the newcomer. I have the least amount of time podcasting. So I am rolling with some old timers here. I'm curious what each of you think about what makes a sobriety or a recovery podcast impactful? Like what makes you want to listen? There's a lot of options out there now, as we know, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So what is it that grabs you into a podcast and then makes it impactful? And Tamar, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Sure. I think there needs to be a focus on the after getting sober for me, because I, day to day in my regular recovery life, I can hear a lot of the stories, what happened, how people changed, but I am where I'm at today because I listen to people's stories after, like what happened after they got sober. What are the cool things that they started doing? And when I first started podcasting, I did one on health, and then I did, the road beyond recovery, because like you, Alysse, when you started the Sober Curator, there was a lot of stuff on how to get sober, but there wasn't a lot of sober lifestyle stuff. And so it's super motivating for me to hear people and what they're doing as a result of getting sober, because that makes me want it more, right? Mm-hmm. If all I ever hear are the stories, the war stories, it makes me feel depressed, first of all. I mean, it certainly reminds me where I came from, but it's like, okay, well, so you got sober and what happened now? Are you doing something cool with it? Or are you sitting there dwelling on the past and doing the poor me thing? And then, as many people do, they relapse, unfortunately. So there has to be that component of what's happened after, and also what are some of the tools they used? I know that Mel Robbins isn't sober, but I'm doing an actual question assessment on last year and what I can make changes for this year. And because there's that call to action where you can actually go along and you're hearing her experience, like that really draws me into those kind of shows.
Is she the one that's known for saying, let them? Do I have that right?
Yes, that's her book.
Let them. I actually really love that statement. Yeah. Not enough to get it tattooed on my body, but maybe we'll see. Amy, what about you? What makes a podcast impactful for you?
Well, I think for me, two things. And I love that you mentioned tools, Tamar, because that's one of the things that I was thinking about is I love action steps. I love listening to people talk, but I really like to be able to implement or try out specifics too and see if I resonate with those in my recovery. So I think at the beginning, when I first started listening to podcasts, I was really into hearing people's stories, how they got sober, what happened, what it was like, and then what it's like now. And ever since that point, it's really transitioned to how do you live one day at a time as a sober person, encountering lifey things that happen. And I love authenticity because I think it's really easy to just kind of paint this like, my life was downtrodden and everyone hated me and my addiction had me in death's grip. And there's totally a place for that. But then what happens as a result of getting sober, and how do we, go about these next 24 hours? And what does that look like now? And so I love hearing about, guess what? I'm still dealing with character defects or things that pop up in my life that I need to make an amends for or apologize for because I'm not settled in my spirit about how that went down, or I don't know how to handle this. I love hearing those things. Mm-hmm. And I too, P.S., love Mel Robbins. And I actually wrote her down as somebody I wanted to mention that wasn't, like a recovery or sobriety podcast, but has, applicable self-awareness tools for people to gain. So I think it's cool that it can come from any direction. If I'm getting some emotional, mental, any kind of, or physical advice or input put into my life, I'm going to give it a whirl and see if it applies to me.
Yeah. And I think that's what people want these days. They want to be entertained. Everybody always wants to be entertained, right? Because we all want that distraction from our everyday life, but they also want to learn something. Bill, what about you? What do you think makes a podcast impactful?
Well, the word authenticity. Wow, I can't speak. If somebody can speak well on a podcast, that helps. But authenticity, it's been said a couple of times. And again, Tamar, we don't edit, so you'd be out of a job if you tried to edit our podcast. You just have to cut it, then be done with it. So you got nothing to do there. But basically somebody being real, any podcast I listen to, not all of them, but the majority of even normal non-sober podcasts I listen to, I don't listen to the structured interview podcasts. I listen to conversations. I'd rather listen to somebody talk about what it is and get to the point through conversation than going through that. Now we're going to talk about, then we're going to talk about. There are podcasts out there that serve a purpose. And there's a couple in particular that I listen to that are very structured, and I do listen to them sometimes, but I don't need to hear how you messed up your life. I get it. We all messed up our lives in different ways, but we all got to the same point. So what now? What do you do at year 1? What did you do at year 5? Mike and I have been sober coming up on 15 years. What do we do now, as opposed to what we did in year 2 and 3. I want to hear from somebody that's doing the same things, maybe not in the same way, but there's a reason why we've stayed sober, is consistency. But we've also made mistakes, and we're very open to talking about that. I don't want to hear about, like you said, Amy, dread and downtrodden and all these different things. We get it. We've all been there, maybe at different levels, but we've all been there. So I like a conversation. I like about, what are you doing now? What are you struggling with? And I want to hear about the stupid things that you're doing in your life, because these are all parts of what we can do because we're sober. So, and yeah, I love to be entertained. I love, ridiculous, conversations. But the main thing to go back to is that it's got to be a real conversation. It's got to sound natural. Structure is okay, but I do like, when people go off on a tangent, there's nothing wrong with that, because that's life, and we need to live those sort of things sober.
And I don't want to hear about what happened either, but like, if you messed up yesterday or today, I definitely want to hear about that. Like, I want to hear about all of your current day mistakes, not what actually, the things that led you to putting the plug in the jug.
And exactly, just real quick, is that, if you're 14 plus years sober, I still make mistakes, and we talk about those. You do? We don't. Oh, number one, yes and yes. But we talk about those things because it's insanity I don't want to paint a picture to somebody that believes that this isn't still work at 14, almost 15 years. It is. It's a different type of work. It's like cruising down the highway versus having to walk uphill, or try to ride uphill on a bicycle. It is different type of work, but it's still work. And if we don't do the work, obviously it's bad consequences. But to your point, yes, I want to hear about people that I still make mistakes, and I want to hear about that. That's important.
Mm-hmm. Most of the time, I feel like I'm going up the hill on a unicycle that I don't know how to ride.
Right. With one leg. With one leg.
Yeah. Right. And a wind blowing in your face, right?
And the wind blowing you down.
Snow shirt.
And snow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a sponsee who a couple months ago said to me, Alysse, what year were you, or what step were you on, or where were you at in your journey when you stopped being an asshole? And I was like, I don't know. I'll let you know when I get there, though. Like, come on. Like, no, I'm still a jerk all the time. All right, Megan, what about you?
Well, I think I can reiterate a lot of what's already been said. For me, I love listening to organic conversations. I love real talk, girl talk. But I really like there to be something in the realm of growth mindset. Like, for me, my experience was so much more confidence and energy. So like, what are you doing with this extra time, energy, money, potentially, like all the things that result from just deciding to have clarity on a daily basis instead of numbing out. And listening to all the ways that people are improving themselves, empowering others. And I agree, it's so valuable, I think, to have some tangible takeaways and some tools. I'm a big fan of like journal prompts and quotes, and just like a small win that you can give the listener, or that you're given, that you can try and implement without having to further, necessarily buy the book or listen to 15 other podcasts or work with that person. For me personally, in early sobriety, I switched alcohol for running. And so to me, it was really perfect to listen to Rich Roll. He's vegan, but I value that. I value he's sober. I value he's obsessed with being healthy in terms of athletics. And so he brings in all sorts of speakers that sort of elevate all those themes and just kept me inspired. So I think it's like thinking of finding the 5 voices that really keep you inspired. And if you could have them as mentors, those to me are like ideal guests and ideal podcasts to be listening to.
Well, and Megan, there's an article on the site. It's probably a little bit over a year plus old now, but you actually went on a trip with Rich Roll and his wife, and it was a week-long retreat, and he was doing live podcasting, which I think is so interesting for podcasters in general to think beyond the mic, right? That you're growing a community. An episode is really kind of like an event. And I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that trip. We'll definitely tag the link in the show notes.
Yeah. Well, I first have to say, like my first allegiance, if you will, is to his wife, but I went more for her spiritual guidance. She's still my spiritual mentor. I'm in her group called Water Tiger. And I was introduced to her because I'd say once or twice a year, he has her on the podcast, and the dynamic is just fire because they're just like oil and water. And they're both in different zones of well-being, but they have a lot of competing ideas. And so to me, it was like this perfect mix opportunity to get to do a retreat with both of them. And I think of the 40 of us that were there in Tuscany for a week, everybody arrived, but there's probably about a handful of us that were really there for Julie, but the majority were there for Rich Roll. Like, he's got one of the top podcasts in the world. And there were people from all over the world, like as far as Australia, lots from Europe, and then of course the US and Canada. And yeah, like Julie just kept laughing because she's like, yeah, this happens every year. Everyone thinks they're coming to like hang out with Rich, and I like make them do yoga every morning, and then we just sit in meditation and like do all this stuff that is maybe not what they thought they signed up for. I mean, you could go for a run with Rich if you wanted to, but the focus was she like really kind of ran the transformation of the podcast. However, one of the guests was also the guest he had on the podcast. He did live, Dr. Alan Desmond. He just launched a podcast, and he's like sort of the vegan plant-based doctor of the UK that has great cookbooks and all sorts of advice, and really just like breaks down his experience as a doctor and how in his early days, how he just didn't see anyone talking or asking when he was dealing with patients that had really serious health issues, like, what are you eating? And so he really breaks down the science of what he would recommend if or what he does recommend to patients. And so, yeah, it was just this experience that I'll never forget. And I think, back to impactful and like speaking well, Bill, there's something really special about the voice. And so it was really strange for me to meet Rich Roll because his podcasts are 2 to 3 hours. I'd listened to hundreds of episodes running, as you train for, was running like training for half marathons, so hours upon hours. And so I really felt like I knew him. And then you meet them and it's like, yeah, I kind of know, but not really. And I'm sure, and he even talks about how it's just as weird for him because he gets approached by all these people who feel like, hey, Rich. And he's like, who are you? Like, stop touching me. Yeah.
Oh, celebrities. They're just like us. All right. My next question for the group, I would love to hear about a podcast episode, maybe on your podcast that was like your favorite. And you guys can't all say me. So let's just, take me off the table because that was an obvious, but like an episode that was the favorite that you did on your podcast. Tamar, back to you.
I have done a few episodes now on purpose and joy. And it's one of those topics I love so much because I always thought that I would, go to school. I did not do very well. I never really graduated from college programs or anything. But then you get a job, you get the family and everything, and then life is good. Well, that is not what happened. And I was an alcoholic. And so things got even worse. So when I finally discovered, probably about 6-7 years into my sobriety, which was when I actually discovered podcasts back in 2019, I had, my podcast coach at the time, he had an actual health and fitness podcast. And I went down to one of his events and met all these other podcasters. And they talked about, getting your message out there. And that kind of started the spark of purpose. Like, what is my life's purpose? And so I went on this kind of, I would say, journey to discover, what am I here for? And so I love talking about that topic because we are capable of so much more than we think. And those of us who have struggled with addiction, alcoholism, whatever, we're go-getters. Like, we really are. I hear it over and over that people love to hire people in recovery because it's like we have something to prove, right? And so talking about purpose and just trying to inspire people to investigate what they're capable of, that gets me just fired up. We've done, I don't know the exact episodes, but I've done at least 4 or 5 of them now, and I love them.
Amy, what about you?
Our producer accidentally stopped the recording and didn't realize it. Classic move. But don't worry, she owned it, and honestly, that's just proof her sobriety is still working. Self-awareness for the win. Now, let's get back to the show because unlike her recording skills, her sobriety is still going strong.
I made a boo-boo. I meant to put mute and I put stop record. So can you just go, Amy, what about you?
Okay. Sorry.
That was my bad. I've never done that before.
Bill. This is why we edit,
This
Bill.
is a first. Look at me go.
No, first of all, don't edit it. We wouldn't edit that. We would come back and be like, do you know what we just did? We just paused the damn recording. We just restarted the recording. This would be in our episode.
Thanks for stopping the recording by accident, Tamar. That was awesome. We'll
No
have
problem.
Talk about your performance later, a performance review later. Amy, what about you?
Okay, I was going to say the time when I interviewed this lady named Lorinda Boyer, and part of her recovery story, and she wrote a book about this, so I feel fine talking about this. It's just high level, was her coming out, and she was in a Christian evangelical background, just like I was growing up. So we both had a lot of similar religious experiences in the way that we were raised and how the deconstruction and reconstruction of faith was part of our recovery journey, even though it looked different with, her marrying a woman, and I went on to have extra kids and just the different paths that life has for us, right? And I think that was one of the pivotal moments for me in interviewing people. Was I felt so connected to her, and I just thought, how is this possible that I am meeting this random stranger? We find that we have so many emotional connections, and it was such a bonding moment. And it was amazing also because it was kind of just post-pandemic, and I had kind of struggled a little bit with Zoom meetings, but love Zoom meetings and loved them then as well, because it was all we had. But I think my brain was telling me this can't really create connections. And then it's nope, wrong. Yes, it can, if I'm open-minded and if I'm willing. And so that was a big pivotal thing for me. And then kind of the part B of that, and I've never had the benefit of having him on my podcast, but I listened to a Franciscan friar named Richard Rohr, and he has a podcast called Everything Belongs. And so the overarching kind of theme of what I'm saying is finding a new spirituality through podcasting and through being open to listening to different ideals and religions. And that too has meant a lot to me in my recovery, just kind of letting the walls fall down of how I was raised and just being curious. And I love that about podcasting is you just get to ask questions and see where it leads and see what happens. And as I wrap up, I will say one thing I do not like about podcasting, which is when you get someone on who's not a talker and literally will give you a 1-word response. And you're like, okay, and can you tell me more? And they kind of can't. And those are those awkward kind of really moments where you just kind of go, oh, shoot. But, you get through it just like anything else.
Yeah, that's funny. Bill, what about you?
I mean, we've had, I do have a favorite. Although Dr. Sarah, we've had her on twice, and we've got an open door policy for her because she's been wonderful and we always get great comments, and it's just, it's a ridiculously relaxed and comfortable conversation, but she's wonderful. But the episode our favorite, the one that we're most proud of, is when our mom died. And she died in end of October of 22, and that was episode 37. And we just did episode 151. I mean, we were just children in this thing when that happened. But so she died early on a Sunday morning. We always record on Fridays. Mike and I talked on Monday, and basically it's like, I have an opinion. I think you do too, but we're recording this Friday, right? And he said, well, hell yeah, we are, and what it was an opportunity for us. It was two things. It was an opportunity for us to basically work through this initial event, this initial grief, really talk about, what we were going through. But I think more importantly is, we talked about before, authenticity and opening up the curtains and everything like that. We allowed everyone else into our lives, to listen to a real conversation about how two men deal with the loss of their mom. Now, Mike is not my biological brother, but he's been in my life since we first got sober. And at that point basically he called my mom from about 2 years on. So, she had been in his life and part of the family and all that stuff for years. So that in itself, and the episode after that, we kind of did a wrap up of the funeral and all that stuff, which was good. But it was, at the end of the recording, when I listened back to it, I didn't remember anything we talked about. It was like my first lead. The first time I ever led a meeting, I call it my blackout lead because I don't remember anything, from it. And this episode was about the same. We just talked about everything, and it was wonderful.
Oh, we're going to put the link to that episode in the show notes as well.
And you know what?
I'm over here like tearing up.
It wasn't a sad thing. I swear to God, it was not a sad episode. And if anyone listened to that, we started off talking about something completely inappropriate. I'm not going to bring it up what it was. And then also made it clear that just because people die, people should not be placed up on a pedestal. And, we were very, very open about her faults and things like that. We tried to be, and the thing of it is that I wanted to get across was that my mom was not the most perfect person in the world. And just because she just died, I wasn't going to place her up on the shelf and say, oh, she's wonderful. And, we didn't say anything bad about her, but, we allowed her to be real through our conversation also. And that's the point. We like real people. We want to hear about real stuff. That's the thing that I despise about social media, and myself included. I mean, I post all these stuff, trips and stuff. I don't talk about my personal life, but there's a purpose with that. I'll post things that I'm doing and sobriety-based things, but I don't let people, I don't talk about, oh, I have this and I have that and whatever. I don't like the fakeness of, social media, or that it can go into a life event too. There's challenges in sobriety. There's challenges in grieving. There's challenges to all of us. So, let's see both sides of the the book and the curtain and whatever.
Megan, what about you?
Well, besides you and Amy, there's 3 guests I've had on twice. So I'd say that says a lot in that they're all really people I look up to and respect their work. And anytime I get an opportunity to have a deep conversation with them and sort of dig deeper, it's an absolute honor. And those 3 people are Julie Pyatt, Rich's wife, who has her own podcast, by the way. That's so powerful. There's like 8 episodes she recorded once upon a time and hasn't touched it since, and it still does really well. And then James Gill Fish, who is a heart-centered relationship coach. And my husband and I did a course with him. The first time I had him on, I just like idolized him. And then later I'd worked with him and we did like a deeper dive based on the work that I'd just done with him. And then Carolina of Euphoric AF, I've had her on twice. And she's been a coach of mine over the years. I just did her 5 certification empowered AF thing. So I do want to highlight, though, for me personally, this last season, one of my absolute favorites, because it was one of these, I sent an email thinking I would never hear from this person, and she replied. I was like, what? Oh my goodness. So one of the things I've done with this, next level energy and excitement and zhuzh for life and everything is really focus on women that are already doing incredible things in business, entrepreneurs, they're building impact businesses, and specifically in the realm of femtech because of my, wellness interest. And so I invited Ida Tin, who's the mother of the term femtech. Her and her partner trademarked the term in order to protect it and keep it in the public domain. And she's the co-founder with 4 other men. They started it in Berlin, of the menstrual app Clue, that you may have not heard of. She's no longer a part of it. She's now, so the whole conversation. So first of all, it was like, fangirl on here. Oh my God, she's coming on. And then the conversation was just so real. And I already knew a little bit about, I don't know if I can swear, but she is an incredible woman and motorcycled by herself in her 20s across the world. And she's a mother. And yeah, we talked a lot about how she was having issues. She's since gone on LinkedIn and said, all right, I give up. No one in the United States will give me a book deal to tell the story of how I got Clue funded. I'm like, this is so crazy. I want to hear the story. And so just having these people that you really respect and idolize, and then also getting the opportunity to see, they've got very similar problems and are dealing with, it's maybe different levels of the same problem, but it just felt like we really connected. And so for me, those conversations where it's like, oh, I feel like I have a new friend after the conversation.
That's great. I love that. Next question that I have is what tips do you have for our listeners on how to vet or find a good podcast? Any tips on that, Tamar?
Well,
besides this one, obviously.
Besides this one, typing in the Sober Curator, besides doing that in your search, I actually use AI. I will type in specifics of what I'm looking for in a category, because there are so many podcasts out there. I think there's 4.2 million podcasts, but only 3 point something are actually active. So I will use AI to search for that content, or I ask a friend. I pull the friend card, because typically the people that I enjoy surrounding myself with have the same interest as I do, or they're growing, right? Like Megan said, she loves that growth part of podcasting, and that's what I really need. So I will tend to chat GPT it, look for something that stands out, also has that I need to relate emotionally, but asking a friend who's doing the same things that you are or similar things, and they can give you really, really good suggestions.
That's a good answer. Amy, what about you?
Well, this is where I really like algorithms. So I like that I can listen to a podcast or watch one on YouTube, and then, it'll say something to the effect of, if you like Jovan Musk or Giorgio, you may like blah, 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 and it'll have additional suggestions. And that is how I ended up finding the Chalene Johnson podcast, which I relate to a lot because she has ADHD. I have ADHD, and she just recently did an alcohol episode about what happened to her when she quit drinking. And she goes through this whole process of what happened to her physically, and just seeing how a Venn diagram, my worlds start combining, and I love that. So that's what I like to do, is just kind of follow the rabbit trail of suggestions.
Bill, you do a lot of driving all over the country with your Airbnb living life, which you have a new book on that. We'll put that in the show notes as well. But are you listening to podcasts when you're doing all that driving?
Yeah, and it was funny when my Spotify Wrapped or something like that came in. I can't remember. It was 20,000 hours of podcasts I listened to in 2024. And I started traveling in March, but there was one day I drove to Myrtle Beach and I had Spotify on and I had the podcast on. It's a lot. To answer that question specifically, and the two suggestions, I've never used AI. That's an interesting thing. I might have to try that. But not only asking friends, doing a search, just a normal sober podcast or whatever I found. That's how I got my initial start with it. But the other thing too is that if you like a podcast, ask the podcast host what they're listening to. Because if I like Tamar's podcast, then we're probably lined up to begin with. Maybe my friend is like, Mike and I are really close in what we believe. We don't necessarily listen to the same things all the time, but if I'm listening to a podcast that I like, and we talk about other podcasts all the time, maybe we don't care. The funny thing, Amy, though, is that I've looked at the bottom of ours, not recently. There's no suggestions of anything like ours, which is discouraging, but also I'm very proud of that.
That's good.
Really,
you should be proud of that. Yeah.
Really, really proud of it. To begin with, I'm like, what? Why is we nothing else? Nothing? But Sober Friends podcast, we had Matt on. That's a good one. Sober Motivation Contest, podcast. A guy, his name is Brad. He's in Canada. He's very structured, ridiculously structured, but I like his content. And I've listened to a few other ones, but I usually find them I've found other podcasts by sometimes on Instagram. Again, the algorithm, people, the things that I do, they're like, oh, have you heard this person? So I found them that way, but asking a friend is wonderful, especially if they line up with you well, because doing a blind search, and I've done it, and I popped into an episode here and there, and I'm like, that's not really what I want type of thing. But that's the other thing, there's nothing wrong with taking a stab in the dark at a podcast. You might surprise yourself.
Megan, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I love all those suggestions. I would add, I do think it's a great conversation starter. It's one I use on LinkedIn quite often. If you really respect the person, like, hey, what are you listening to? I ask them what they're reading or what their audiobooks are listening or what podcasts, and it often just gives a lot of ideas. Another, I personally, I'm kind of committed to 4 or 5 at a time. So if it's a podcast that I don't really like 90% of the episodes, I feel like it's not my podcast. Once in a while, I'll find, be led to a specific episode and really enjoy the episode and then leave it at that. But it's more like someone go back to Rich. He has so many guests. So I will drill down on one of his guests. Often they have their own podcast. Or if you really like that conversation, I'll search that guest and you'll see all the different other podcasts they've come out on. And that kind of leads me to, down different rabbit holes that are, usually more my vibe. And yeah, I think it's something almost spiritual, the podcast that you like as well, because I do have a few besties where I'm like, what are you listening to? And last night I tried to, and I'm like, no, no. This is not my vibe. And I'm not really a person that likes, the pure news ones or anything like that, unless I'm curious about a specific event or something. It's more these organic conversations of people being real and sharing, takeaways on their life that you can feel like you belong and less alone.
All right. As we wrap up here, we're going to go into what I like to call sober shots. Don't worry. Nobody's going to restart their day count. I'm just going to fire off some really quick questions and you're just going to answer boom, boom, boom. We're going to go down the line just like we've been doing. Tamar, Amy, Bill, Megan. Tamar, Amy, Bill, Megan. First question is Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or Audible?
Apple.
Oh, I'm next. I'm sorry. I'm going to say Spotify because now I'm new on Spotify.
Spotify,
but pretty close with Apple.
Interesting. One word that would describe your ideal podcast, Tamar.
Funny.
Intriguing.
engaging,
Thoughtful.
Dream guest that you could have on your podcast, Tamar.
Brene Brown.
Jen Hatmaker.
Mark Barron.
Drew Barrymore.
Although, did I see something yesterday that she might be getting canceled for something? I don't know. I got to do some research. I saw it on the TikTok. It might not be true. Okay. Morning or evening listener, Tamar.
Morning.
Amy.
Morning.
Morning.
Well, I'm often listening to fall asleep at bedtime, so both.
Interesting. To fall asleep at bedtime. Interesting. All right. And favorite podcast host or just favorite podcast in general. And you can't say your own. Okay. You could say this one. Just kidding. You can't say this one either. Tamar.
Adam Shibley, Podcast Business School.
I'm going to go with the Brene Brown, Unlocking Us.
Mark Maron, again, he talks about not only guests and comedians celebrities, but, Dipson has really good sobriety conversations also.
I'm going to say it's hard because I've got about 10, but this one, that's TLDR. It's by Wealth Simple, and it's like all the gossip in the world of business and money. And it talks both sides of the border. So it's one of the reasons I love it. And it's very funny.
And nobody said true crime, huh? We're not into murderers over here. Okay. Well, that's all right. That is how I got my start in listening to podcasts, is I started in true crime. It never occurred to me to listen to sobriety or recovery podcasts until after I launched the Sober Curator, and I was like 15 years sober. So I got my start in true crime. But my favorite would be, I do really like Dax Shepard. Not all the time, but a lot of the times. And I really he has a lot of guests on who are also sober. And of course I love celebrities. So I'm going to go with Armchair Expert.
Can I make one more comment, Alysse?
Mm-hmm.
I want to give a shout out to Katie Mack for season 1, Fucking Sober. If you haven't listened to it, it makes you feel like you're in a movie. And I loved, even though it was about what happened, it's like you're listening to a movie. It's so good. And, she's part of our Sober Curator community. But if you're looking for a sober podcast, wow.
Fucking Sober, the first 90 days, season 1 won a Webby, and it deserved it. She is working on season 3 right now with none other than Chris Marshall, who I believe just is dropping a book in February, I believe. For those of you that don't know, he opened the first alcohol-free bar in Austin. So he was definitely a trendsetter. So that is what season 3 is going to be about. And, when I came across Fucking Sober, the first 90 days, she only had, I think 3 episodes were out, and she was dropping them, I think, once a week. And I just started throwing money at, donating to it. I just became obsessed immediately with that one. And then I was like, you now have to be one of my best friends, because I'm obsessed with the podcast. Because I'd never heard a podcast that was done like a movie, like it was all, it sounds fiction. It sounds like a narrative. It sounds like you're listening to a story. And I hope we hear more of that. And I hope we hear more of all of you, which we will, because you will be coming back and we will be talking about more about podcasting and more podcasts that we uncover and things that we love. But thank you for all of you for showing up today and for what you do to contribute to your podcasts and being part of the Recovery Podcastland network at the Sober Curator. Until the next time, keep it fun, keep it real, keep it sober. I'm working on the close, you guys.
Good.
Keep it real.
Keep it real, yo. Don't drink. Keep your nose clean. I don't know. See you next time. Welcome to the Sober Curator podcast, where sobriety isn't just a lifestyle choice, it's the ultimate life hack. I'm Alysse Bryson, your fearless guide to a world where hangovers are canceled, fun is mandatory, and we still know how to shut down a dance floor, just with better shoes.
And I'm Tamar Routly, aka T-Bouge, your co-pilot, chaos coordinator, and the one who keeps Alysse from turning this podcast into a full-blown reality show. Buckle up, sober party people.
From lifestyle and travel to pop culture and zero-proof cocktails, we're serving up the stories, trends, and guests that prove sobriety isn't just about what you're missing. It's about finally remembering where you left your keys. Let's get the party started.